Hello, my name is Lennox Lewis, 23 years old, fresh out of college with a communications degree still smelling of printer ink, but now fumbling through long, uncertain days in a cramped apartment in Manchester, New Hampshire. Manchester, where I currently live, is an old industrial city with red brick streets, brownstone buildings faded by time, and an air that always carries the faint smell of smoke from distant factories. Sometimes I stand by the window watching the hurried flow of people below, wondering what I'm doing in this city that doesn't quite feel familiar. I came here with dreams of finding a decent job, a fresh start, but everything seems to be an endless loop of job applications, polite rejection emails, and sleepless nights in an apartment where the sound of car horns outside feels like it's drilling into my head. I was born and raised in Claremont, a much smaller town where everyone knows each other across generations, where winding roads lead through lush green fields and charming white wooden houses. Claremont is where my childhood memories are woven with vibrant summers spent at my grandmother Martha's, afternoons running around in her garden full of carnations, and summer nights listening to her stories by the fireplace. But now, Claremont is just a distant memory for me, a place I no longer want to return to often. Not because I don't love it, but because the rifts in my family have made everything feel suffocating. My family isn't the warm, picture-perfect kind you see in TV dramas. My father, Gregory Lewis, is a local police officer in Claremont. He's a tall, broad man with a deep, gruff voice and a perpetually stern expression, as if the whole world owes him an apology. My father was never an easy man to approach, not even for me or my sister Brenda. He had unbreakable rules at home, no arguing, no defying him, and always being proper in the eyes of the neighbors. I remember when I was 12, I accidentally broke one of my mother's old vases, and my father looked at me with eyes that made me feel like I had committed an unforgivable crime. He didn't hit me, but his heavy silence was more terrifying than any shouting could ever be. My mother, Vanessa Lewis, is different, but not exactly easier to deal with. She's a literature teacher at the local high school, and she carries the demeanor of someone who expects everything to be perfect. She loves to lecture, from how I eat, how I talk, to how I should live my life to be proper. Every time I visit home, she starts with a long sermon about how I need to find a stable job, set clear goals, and become a useful member of society. I know she loves me, but the way she shows that love often makes me feel weighed down by a never-ending list of expectations I can never fully meet. My parents rarely talk about my grandmother Martha, the person I love more than anyone in the world. She lives alone in the suburbs of Handover, about an hour's drive from Claremont. At 82, her spirit is still as sharp as a young person's. She used to be an elementary school teacher, and perhaps that's why she has a gentle, loving way of speaking, yet with a firmness that commands respect. She's been a widow since I was young, and since then she's lived alone in a small, beautiful wooden house surrounded by a garden she tends to like a work of art. Every time I visit, she greets me with a warm hug and a plate of homemade cookies fragrant with the scent of butter and vanilla. She's the only person in my family who makes me feel like I can be myself without needing to try to please anyone. When I was a child, every summer my parents would send me and Brenda to stay with Grandma. Those were the happiest days of my memories. Brenda and I would run around the fields behind her house, pick apples from the old apple tree, or sit and listen to her stories about her youth and my grandfather, whom I never met. She always had a way of making everything exciting, even the smallest tasks like weeding the garden or dusting the bookshelf. She told me, "Lennox, life is like a book. You have to turn each page to find your story." Her words, though simple, have stayed with me, like a guiding light on the days I feel lost. But things started to change when my sister Brenda decided to marry someone my parents didn't approve of. Brenda, 5 years older than me, was the sister I always admired. She's strong, independent, and has a smile that could melt anyone. But when she announced she was marrying Jake, a car mechanic with a modest income, my parents were furious. My father called Jake a loser and my mother cried, saying Brenda was ruining her future. In the end, they disowned her, banned her from the house, and nearly cut off all contact. I remember the night Brenda left home. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Lennox, don't let them force you to live a life that's not yours." I could only nod, tears streaming down my face, my heart in turmoil because I didn't know how to keep her from leaving. Though Brenda and I are geographically distant, we still keep in touch, mostly through video calls. She tells me about her life in a small town near Boston, the challenges of being a mother to a 3-year-old girl, and how she and Jake are trying to build a home despite the lack of family support. I've always admired her resilience, but at the same time I started to feel a growing distance from my parents. I don't understand how they could be so cold to their own daughter, and I began to wonder if one day they might treat me the same way. Life in Manchester isn't easy. The apartment I rent is on the 3rd floor of an old building with stained walls and creaky wooden floors that groan with every step. I share a bathroom with 3 other tenants, and every morning I have to line up to get a hot shower. My savings are running low, and the freelance jobs I take, writing ads, editing content for small websites, barely cover rent and a few packs of instant noodles. Some nights I sit on my creaky old bed staring at my laptop screen filled with rejection emails, wondering if I'm on the right path. But through all those exhausting days, what keeps me going is Grandma Martha. I often call her, and her warm voice over the phone is the only medicine that helps me forget my worries. She tells me about her garden, the flowers that have just bloomed, or how she still beats her neighbors at their weekly domino games. She always asks me, "Lennox, are you happy?" And I, though weighed down inside, always reply, "I'm fine, Grandma. Just finding my way." Little did I know that just a few weeks later, an event would change my life forever. A call from Grandma, her voice trembling over the phone, pulled me out of the monotonous cycle of days and thrust me into an emotional journey, where I had to confront not only myself but also the people I love most in my family. That afternoon, I was sitting in my cramped apartment, surrounded by papers and my laptop open to a job search page. A light rain was falling outside the window, adding to the gloom of Manchester's atmosphere. My phone rang, and when I saw Grandma's name on the screen, my heart suddenly raced. She rarely called at this hour, usually only in the late evenings after she'd finished tending to her garden and sat down with a cup of peppermint tea. I answered, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "Grandma, what's so special today that you're calling me like this?" Her voice on the other end wasn't as clear and lively as usual. It was weak, slightly trembling, as if she were trying to hold something back. "Lennox, I had a bit of a dizzy spell. The neighbor took me to the hospital, but I'm fine now. Don't worry too much, okay?" Hearing her words sent a jolt down my spine. "Dizzy? Grandma, what happened? What did the doctor say? Do you need me to come right away?" I asked in a rush, my hands already fumbling for my car keys. She gave a soft laugh, the kind I knew she used to try to reassure me. "It's all right, my dear. It was just a spike in my blood pressure. The doctor said I need to rest more. I'm still fine, just maybe I need someone around a bit more often." She paused, then continued in a quieter voice. "Your parents just called saying I should sell the house in Handover and move to Claremont to live with them. I'm not ready for that, Lennox. This is my home, your grandfather's home, filled with so many memories, and I don't want to burden anyone." I sank into my chair, my mind reeling. Sell the house? Move to Claremont to live with my parents? The idea made me uneasy, not because I didn't want Grandma to be cared for, but because I knew my parents. They weren't the patient or gentle type, especially when it came to things that required sacrifice. I remembered how my father would snap at Brenda just for spilling coffee on the dining table, or how my mother would frown when I left muddy shoes at the door. Would they really take good care of her? But then I tried to reassure myself. Maybe I was overthinking. They're her children. They'd do the right thing, wouldn't they? "Grandma, let me come visit you first and then we can talk more, okay?" I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She agreed and I hung up. a sense of unease still lingering in my mind. The next day, I texted to take a day off from my side job at the coffee shop near my place, then packed a few clothes into a backpack. The drive from Manchester to Hanover wasn't long, but that day every mile felt like it stretched on forever. I couldn't stop thinking about Grandma, about those vibrant summers when I was little, when she'd take me blueberry picking in the woods or teach me how to make crispy cookies. She was the only person in my family who made me feel unconditionally loved, and now the thought of her growing frail squeezed my heart tight. When I arrived in Hanover, it was already dusk. Grandma's wooden house was just as I remembered, gray shingles, a white fence covered in climbing vines, and the small front garden bursting with carnations. I knocked, and she opened the door, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Lennox, you really came? I thought you were too busy." She hugged me, a warm but frailer embrace than I remembered. I looked at her, her silver hair neatly tied back, her face still radiant but with deeper wrinkles, her eyes more tired. "Grandma, of course I had to come. If you're not well, I can't rest easy," I said, forcing a smile to hide my worry. We sat in the living room on her beloved old sofa. She told me about what happened. She was watering her plants when the world suddenly spun, and thankfully her neighbor Susan ran over to help and called an ambulance. The doctor said her blood pressure had spiked, possibly due to stress or age. They advised her to have someone around regularly, at least for the next few months, to monitor her. "I don't want to trouble anyone, Lennox," she said, fidgeting with the edge of her embroidered handkerchief. "But your parents keep insisting I move to Claremont. Your father says they'll take care of me there, that it'll be better." I listened, but a sense of discomfort welled up inside me. I knew my parents. They always said things that sounded right, but their actions often told a different story. I remembered how they treated Brenda, how they cut her off just because she chose her own path. Would they really be ready to care for Grandma? Or were they just doing it to save face? "Grandma, what do you think about moving to Claremont?" I asked gently, not wanting to add to her worries. She looked out the window, where the dim streetlights cast a soft glow on the garden. "I don't want to leave this place, Lennox. This is my home, your grandfather's home. Every corner holds memories, but I also don't want you to worry too much about me. If your parents really want me to come, I'll try. I just worry." She paused, her eyes dropping as if searching for the right words. "Worry about what, Grandma?" I asked, taking her hand. She gave a sad smile. "I worry they don't really want me there." Her words cut into my heart like a knife. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that my parents would take good care of her, but deep down, I feared she might be right. I stayed with her that entire evening. We ate cookies and drank tea, talking about old times, but my mind was swirling with questions. When I returned to Manchester, I called Brenda and told her everything. "Lennox, you need to be careful," Brenda said, her voice serious. "Our parents aren't easy people. If Grandma moves in with them, you should check on her often. Don't leave her alone with them for too long." Brenda's words only deepened my unease. But just a few weeks later, my parents went to Hanover and things moved faster than I expected. One morning, my father called me, his voice firm. "Lennox, your mother and I convinced Grandma. She's agreed to sell the house and move to Claremont to live with us. You don't need to worry anymore. We'll take care of her." My heart sank as I listened. "Dad, does Grandma really want this? She's so attached to the house in Hanover." My father snapped, "Don't interfere. We're only doing what's best for her. Focus on finding a job and stop making us worry." I didn't dare argue, but the unease wouldn't leave me. That weekend, I drove back to Hanover to see Grandma. When I arrived, the house already felt different. The carnation pots were neatly stacked in a corner, and a "for sale" sign stood in the front yard. Grandma sat in the living room next to a few packed boxes. "I've agreed, Lennox," she said, her voice calm but her eyes tinged with sadness. "I don't want to burden your parents, but I also don't want you to worry about me. In Claremont, I'll probably be fine." I knelt in front of her, taking her frail hands. "Grandma, if you don't want this, I'll find a way. I can come here more often or find someone to help you." But she shook her head, smiling. "Lennox, I'm old. I just want you to be at peace. If your parents want me to come, I'll try. For you, for the family." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe my parents would care for her properly, that they'd do as they promised. But another part, the deepest part, screamed that I was making a huge mistake. I hugged her tightly, holding back tears. "I'll visit you often," I promised, my voice choked. "I won't let you be alone." In the days that followed, I tried to keep my promise. Every evening after finishing my freelance writing or shifts at the coffee shop, I called Grandma. Her voice over the phone was still warm, but I began to notice longer pauses, hesitant words that she never used to have. "I'm fine, Lennox," she would often say, but I could sense she was hiding something. I told myself I was probably overthinking, that she was just adjusting to her new life in Claremont, where my parents had set up a room for her. My father once boasted over the phone, "Your grandma's room is clean, fully equipped. Your mother even bought her a massage chair. Don't worry, we're doing well." I wanted to believe him. I really did. I wanted to believe that he and my mother would treat Grandma with the love and care she deserved. But every time I called, her stories made me uneasy. "I like the massage chair," she said once, her voice soft. "But your father told me not to turn on the TV in the morning because he needs quiet to read the newspaper." I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "Dad's always been grumpy like that, Grandma. Just ignore him." But she didn't laugh along. She only let out a soft sigh, and that sound pierced my heart like a needle. A week passed, then two. I was busy with failed job interviews and tight deadlines, but not a single day went by without me calling Grandma. One evening, after coming home exhausted and soaked from a sudden rain in Manchester, I called her as usual. The phone rang longer than normal, and when she answered, her voice was so faint I had to press the phone to my ear to hear clearly. "Lennox, I don't want to trouble you," she began, her voice trembling. "But here, it feels like your parents don't want me around." I bolted upright on my creaky old bed, feeling as if someone had dumped cold water over me. "What do you mean, Grandma? What did they do to you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. But my hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. She spoke softly, her voice fading as if afraid someone might overhear. "Your father yelled at me when I accidentally spilled a glass of water on the table. Your mother. She told me not to meddle in the kitchen, that I mess everything up." She paused, then continued, her voice heavy with sadness. "I know they're busy, but I feel like a burden." My heart twisted as I listened. I wanted to jump in the car and drive straight to Claremont right then, but it was late, and I knew I needed to stay calm and think. "Grandma, don't worry," I said, trying to make my voice steady. "I'll come visit you this weekend. I'll talk to Mom and Dad. Everything will be okay." But after hanging up, I sat frozen in my chair, staring into the darkness of my apartment. I remembered Brenda's words, "Be careful, Lennox. Don't leave her alone with them too long." I hadn't wanted to believe her, hadn't wanted to think my parents could treat Grandma like that. But now, her words rang in my head like an alarm bell. That weekend, I drove to Claremont. The route was familiar, but this time every turn felt like it was leading me into a zone of unease. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mother opened the door, a forced smile on her lips. "Lennox, you're here to see Grandma? She's in her room, resting." I nodded, swallowing my discomfort, and stepped inside. Everything looked the same, the spotless kitchen, the tidy living room. But there was a coldness to it, as if the house lacked the warmth I used to feel as a child. I knocked on Grandma's door. She was sitting in an armchair, reading an old book. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, but I noticed she was thinner, her shoulders slightly hunched. "Lennox, you're here." She stood and hugged me tightly, but the embrace wasn't as strong as before. I sat with her, asking about everything, trying to make her laugh. But when I mentioned my parents, she only shook her head slightly. "They're good to me, but I don't know if I've done something wrong." It feels like they don't want me here for long. I tried to defend my parents, not because I believed them, but because I didn't want her to feel worse. Grandma, you know how they are. Brenda and I are used to it. You'll get used to it too, just give it time. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I was lying to myself. What she described wasn't just their grumpy nature. It was coldness, a lack of respect I couldn't accept. I stayed all day trying to cheer her up by telling stories about Manchester, about the quirky tenants in my building. She smiled, but her eyes still carried a trace of sadness. When I was about to leave, my father pulled me aside. "Lennox, don't make Grandma worry more," he said, his voice low and cold. "Your mother and I are doing our best to take care of her. Don't listen to her nonsense and misunderstand us." I nodded, but inside I knew I couldn't ignore it. I called Brenda as soon as I got back to Manchester and told her everything. "Lennox, don't you see?" Brenda was almost losing her patience over the phone. "They're controlling her. They don't want her there, but they also don't want to be seen as unfilial. You have to do something." I knew she was right, but I hesitated. I was afraid of confronting my parents, afraid of further fracturing our already fragile relationship. But every time I called Grandma, her voice grew weaker and her stories hurt me more. Once she told me my mother had taken her phone away at night, claiming she didn't need it much. Another time, she said my father had snapped at her for accidentally dropping a bowl in the kitchen. "I don't want to cause trouble, Lennox," she said, her voice breaking. "I miss my house in Hanover. There I could be myself." Those calls were like alarm bells, growing louder and more urgent. I started losing sleep, my mind swirling with questions. Was I abandoning her? Could I do something to change this? I tried calling my parents, asking about Grandma, but every time I brought it up, they brushed me off. "Focus on your own life, Lennox," my mother said, her voice sharp. "Grandma's here with us, everything's fine." But I knew it wasn't fine. Not at all. Grandma's 82nd birthday was approaching, and I decided it would be the perfect opportunity to do something special for her. I wanted her to know that despite all the chaos, I was still here, always loving and cherishing her. I had saved up a bit of money from my freelance writing, enough to buy a chocolate cake, her favorite kind, from a small bakery in Manchester that I knew she'd love. I also made a handmade card, scribbling clumsy but heartfelt words. "Grandma, thank you for always being my light. I love you forever." I imagined her smiling as she cut the cake, her eyes lighting up like they did during those summer days in Hanover. And I told myself that even if it was just a small celebration, I'd make the day meaningful for her. I called my mother beforehand to let her know I'd be coming to Claremont to celebrate Grandma's birthday. "All right, fine," she said over the phone, her voice flat as if responding to a casual question. "But don't make it too noisy. She needs rest." I nodded to myself, trying not to dwell on her cold tone. I carefully packed the cake in an insulated box and drove to Claremont, a mix of excitement and worry in my heart. On the way, I turned on the radio, letting upbeat songs push away the unease clinging to me. But deep down, I could still hear my intuition whispering, "Something's not right, Lennox." When I arrived at my parents' house, it was already dusk. The house was strangely quiet, lacking the warm glow from the living room I was used to. I knocked, clutching the cake box, my heart uneasy. My mother opened the door, her face devoid of a smile, just a fleeting glance before turning back inside. "Lennox, you're here," she said, her voice bland. "Come in." I stepped inside, looking around. "Where's Grandma, Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She paused, wiping a plate in the kitchen, then turned to look at me. "She's not here anymore," she said, her tone as casual as if she were mentioning a trivial matter. "We've moved her to a nursing home nearby. It's the best place for her with professional care." My heart plummeted. "A nursing home?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "What are you talking about? Why didn't anyone tell me? Did she agree to this?" The cake box in my hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy, as if it were pressing down on my chest. My mother sighed, setting the plate down, looking at me as if I were overreacting. "Lennox, don't be dramatic. We discussed it with her and she agreed. She'll be better cared for there with nurses and doctors. We can't take care of her forever." I stood frozen, my mind reeling. I remembered a call when Grandma's voice trembled as she mentioned a nursing home. She didn't want to be there, yet now my mother was saying she had agreed to it. I looked at her, trying to believe her words were true. "Mom, why didn't you tell me first? I'm her grandson, I have a right to know," I said loudly, but she just shrugged. "You're busy in Manchester, we didn't want to bother you. Besides, it's already decided." I couldn't stay there another second. I asked for the nursing home's address, then rushed to my car, still clutching the cake box. The nursing home was only a few miles away, but every minute felt like an eternity. I berated myself endlessly. Why didn't I listen to her? Why did I trust that my parents would take good care of her? Brenda's words echoed in my mind. "Be careful, Lennox. Don't leave her alone with them too long." But then I tried to reassure myself that maybe my parents had chosen a decent nursing home, that she'd be properly cared for. It had to be that way. It just had to. But the truth hit me like a bucket of ice water splashing straight in my face. When I arrived at the nursing home, it was pitch dark. The building loomed before me, a drab concrete block, old and worn, with windows casting dim yellow light. The smell of mold hit me as soon as I stepped inside, mingled with the stench of cheap disinfectant. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with a tired face, looked at me as if I were an inconvenience. "I'm here to see Martha Lewis," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She flipped through a ledger, then pointed down a hallway. "Room 12, end of the corridor." I walked down the hall, my heart pounding. The stained walls, the faint moans from some room, and the flickering fluorescent lights made me shudder. This wasn't a place for Grandma. Not for the woman who spent her life tending to her carnation garden and telling me warm stories. As I approached room 12, I was about to knock but froze. Through the slight gap in the barely closed door, I saw a scene that made my blood run cold. My grandmother, small, frail, trembling on an iron bed. A burly nurse stood over her, yanking her hair harshly, shouting in her face, "I told you to lie down. Stop being a nuisance, old lady." Grandma let out a small, choked cry, barely audible. But I heard it, too clearly. My heart exploded, everything blurred in a wave of rage. I don't remember how I burst through the door. All I know is I was still holding the birthday cake box, and I hurled it straight at the nurse's face. Chocolate frosting splattered across her hair, her white blouse covering her shocked expression. "Don't touch my grandma," I growled. The nurse staggered back, stunned, but I didn't care. I helped Grandma up, pulling her into a tight embrace, feeling her frail body trembling in my arms. "Grandma, I'm here now. I'm taking you out of here. You're not staying in this place another second." She didn't speak right away. Her thin hand gripped mine faintly, as if afraid she was dreaming. After a moment, she whispered, her voice like a breath of wind. You really came." I was afraid. I'd have to die in this room. I quickly gathered her few belongings, a small cloth bag with some clothes and the book she loved to read, then helped her out of that room without looking back. The nurse shouted something behind us, but I didn't listen. All I knew was that I had to get her out of this place, the place my parents called the best for her. We moved through the hallway, then the main lobby, where a few patients silently glanced up like shadows. Just a few steps from the glass entrance doors, two older security guards suddenly stepped forward, blocking our path. "You can't take a patient out without paperwork," one of them said, his hand gripping the walkie-talkie at his hip. I didn't respond. I only held Grandma tighter, staring straight at them. A cold, piercing look, as if I were ready to punch anyone who dared take another step. I was taller, younger, stronger. And at that moment, I was like a torch, ready to burn through any obstacle in my way. The guards hesitated, stepping back slightly. One fumbled with his walkie-talkie, muttering something unclear, while the other stood still, his eyes avoiding mine. They knew. This wasn't a confrontation they were prepared to take on. I walked past them slowly, deliberately, The glass doors slid open automatically. No one dared stop us. Outside, a cold wind blew, carrying the crisp chill of New Hampshire's autumn, tousling Grandma's hair across her face. I opened the car door, gently helping her into the front seat, buckling her seatbelt carefully as if she were a precious gift that could break at any moment. "Grandma, can I take you to my place?" I asked, my voice trembling, still reeling from what I had just witnessed. She gripped my hand, her thin, cold fingers holding on tightly. "Lennox, as long as I'm out of that place, I'll go anywhere," she said, her voice weak but resolute. I nodded, not daring to look directly into her eyes, afraid she'd see the tears welling up in mine. I started the car, the engine's low growl breaking the silence of the night. Inside the car, the cramped space felt warm with her presence. I glanced at her and saw her staring out the window, her eyes heavy with sadness. "Grandma, would you like some music?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. She turned to me, offering a faint smile. "Thank you, dear. I just need to rest for a bit." I drove quietly, guiding her through the wet streets. A light rain began to fall, droplets pattering on the windshield as if crying for what she had endured. I brought her to Manchester, to my small, modest apartment. It wasn't luxurious or comfortable, but at least it was safe. That evening, I held a birthday celebration for her right there in my cramped room. There was no fancy table or cake. The original cake was somewhere on the nursing home floor, but I and a few neighbors from the building pooled our money to buy a new, smaller cake and a few candles. We sang happy birthday, laughed and joked, and for the first time in weeks I saw her smile, a genuine smile free of any strain. "Lennox, thank you," she whispered, holding my hand. "This is the happiest birthday I've had." I squeezed her hand, unable to speak, only nodding as I fought back tears. The next morning, I woke up early, brewed a cup of tea for Grandma, and left a note on the table. "Grandma, I'm stepping out for a bit, but I'll be back soon. Please rest." I didn't want her to worry, didn't want her to know I was about to walk into a battle I hadn't prepared for. Manchester's sky was overcast, heavy with gray clouds as if mirroring my mood. I drove to Claremont, the familiar road now feeling like it was leading me to a battlefield. With every turn of the wheel, my heart pounded harder, as if it might leap out of my chest. When I arrived at my parents' house, it stood before me with a deceptive calm. White picket fence, neatly trimmed lawn, and windows glowing with yellow light. But I knew there was no warmth inside for Grandma. I knocked on the door, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. My father opened the door, his face tightening when he saw me. "Lennox? What are you doing here so early?" he asked, his voice low but laced with irritation. "I need to talk to you and Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though anger was boiling inside me. He stared at me for a moment, then opened the door wider, gesturing for me to come in. My mother was in the kitchen wiping a plate with a cloth, but when she saw me, she set it down, her eyes cold. "What's so important that you had to come all the way here?" she asked, her tone flat, as if she already knew why I was there. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the trembling inside. "What did you do to Grandma?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "Why did you send her to that awful nursing home without telling me? You promised to take care of her, but is that how you do it? Letting her be treated like a prisoner?" My father narrowed his eyes, his voice a growl. "What are you talking about, Lennox? We did everything for her. That nursing home is the best place with nurses and doctors. Do you think we have time to babysit her?" "The best place?" I raised my voice, unable to hold back any longer. "Do you know what I saw there? A nurse yanking her hair, yelling in her face. The room was filthy, reeking of mold, and she was sitting there, scared and alone. Is that what you call the best place?" I felt hot tears roll down my cheeks, but I didn't care. I just wanted them to understand, to see what I had seen. My mother stepped forward, her voice icy. "Lennox, don't make a scene. She's old and needs professional care. We couldn't keep her here forever. We have our own lives. Do you think we wanted this? We're only doing what's best for her." Her words cut like a knife, not because they were sharp, but because they were hollow. devoid of any feeling. I looked at her, the woman who once taught me about compassion through literature in school, and wondered when she had disappeared. "You're not doing what's best for her," I said, my voice choking. "You're doing what's best for yourselves. You forced her to sell her house, brought her here, then dumped her somewhere else to avoid responsibility. Don't you see how much she's suffering? Don't you see what she needs?" I turned to my father, who stood there, his face red with anger. "You're a cop. Mom's a teacher. You both always talk about responsibility, about morals. But the way you treated her, it's no different from hypocrites living ungratefully." That was the final straw. My father stormed toward me, swift as a hurricane, and before I could react, a stinging slap landed across my cheek. My head rang, the pain burning, but I didn't back down. I looked straight into his eyes, seeing anger mixed with something else. Perhaps shame, but he hid it too quickly. "How dare you talk to me like that?" he roared. "Who do you think you are, criticizing your parents? You, a jobless kid living in a cheap apartment, think you have the right to lecture us?" His words hit me like hammers to the chest, but I didn't crumble. "I may have nothing," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "But at least I didn't abandon the woman who raised you. I didn't push her into a place like hell just to save face." I turned and walked to the door, not looking back. My mother called after me, her voice half pleading, half angry. "Lennox, come back here. You can't talk to us like that." But I didn't stop. I couldn't stay another second in that house, where family ties had been strangled by selfishness. I drove back to Manchester, my mind blank, my cheek still stinging from the slap. But more than the physical pain was the ache in my heart. I had hoped, even just a little, that my parents would feel remorse, would apologize, would admit they were wrong. But no, they didn't think they'd done anything wrong. They only cared about maintaining their image as dutiful children in front of neighbors, in front of society. When I got back to the apartment, Grandma was sitting in a chair reading her old book. She looked up and smiled, but her smile faded when she saw my face. "Lennox, what's wrong? Did something happen?" she asked, her voice full of worry. I knelt before her, taking her hands, trying to hold back tears. "I'm fine, Grandma. I just talked to Mom and Dad. I won't let them hurt you anymore, I promise." She stroked my hair the way she did when I was a child. "Lennox, I know you love me, but don't let this hurt you. Family is like that. It's not always what you want it to be." Her words were gentle, but I couldn't accept them. No, family wasn't supposed to be like that. Family wasn't about deceit, wasn't about pushing loved ones into suffering. I hugged her, feeling the warmth of the woman who had given me the world, and silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect her, no matter the cost. That night, I called Brenda and told her everything. She was silent for a moment, then spoke, her voice filled with anger but also determination. "Lennox, you did the right thing by taking her out of there. Now you have to make this a big deal. You can't let Mom and Dad get away with this. They need to know they were wrong." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Brenda was right. This wasn't just about me and Grandma. It was about justice, about humanity, about standing up for what was right. And I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. After the call with Brenda, I sat in my apartment, the dim yellow light casting shadows on the stained walls. Grandma was asleep, her steady breathing from the small bed the only sound in the quiet room. I looked at my phone, my fingers scrolling across the screen, feeling a storm raging inside me. Brenda was right. This couldn't end here. My parents had pushed Grandma into a place like hell, and they needed to be held accountable. But how? I was just a 23-year-old, unemployed, living in a cramped apartment with no power or money. I wondered if I had the strength to confront them, to challenge the perfect image they'd built in the eyes of the community. Then I thought of social media. I wasn't one for attention, but I knew the power of posts, of shared stories. In my communications studies, I'd learned that a truthful story could move the world. I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and started typing. I poured out everything, from the days my parents convinced Grandma to sell her beloved house in Hanover, to their cold treatment of her in Claremont, and finally to the horrific nursing home where she was mistreated by a nurse. I wrote about my father's slap, my mother's cold stare, and Grandma's pain at being abandoned. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. I just told the truth, but each word felt like a knife cutting into my heart. This is the story of my grandmother, a woman who spent her life loving her family, only to be betrayed by her own son and daughter-in-law, I wrote. I'm sharing this not for revenge, but so no one else has to suffer like she did. I hesitated for a moment before hitting post. My hands trembled, my heart pounding. I knew this post would stir up a storm, upend everything, but I had no other choice. I clicked post, and the story appeared on my social media account, a personal page with only a few hundred followers, mostly friends and former colleagues. I closed the laptop, lay on the floor, stared at the cracked ceiling, and wondered if I'd just done something brave or foolish. The next morning, my phone buzzed incessantly. I opened it, and my heart nearly stopped. The post had been shared hundreds of times with thousands of likes and a flood of comments. "That's horrific. How could someone treat their own mother like that?" one person wrote. "You're so brave for standing up for your grandma, Lennox. Don't give up," another commented. Some sent private messages sharing their own stories of elderly loved ones being neglected. I read them with tears streaming down my face. I hadn't expected Grandma's story to touch so many people, but at the same time I was scared. The storm was growing and I didn't know where it would lead. By noon, Brenda called, her voice brimming with excitement. "Lennox, have you seen your post? It's gone viral. People are furious, calling Mom and Dad ungrateful. You did great." I smiled, but it was tinged with worry. "I don't know where this is going. What if they sue me?" Brenda laughed loudly over the phone. "Sue? They don't have a leg to stand on. You told the truth, and the truth will protect you. But you should do something bigger. Find someone to help Grandma get justice." Her words got me thinking. As I scrolled through the comments, a message from a stranger caught my eye. She introduced herself as Anna, a volunteer with the Elder Justice Alliance, a nonprofit dedicated to addressing elder abuse. "Lennox, I read your story," the message read. "We can help you and your grandmother. Please contact me to discuss further." I didn't hesitate and called Anna immediately. She listened to me recount everything, her voice calm but resolute. "Your grandmother's case isn't unique," she said. "We've seen many like it. If you agree, we'll send a lawyer to work with you and Mrs. Martha, especially regarding the sale of her house in Hanover." I brought Grandma to meet Anna and a lawyer named Michael the following week at a small cafe in Manchester. Grandma sat beside me holding a cup of tea, her eyes still carrying a trace of fear but also a glimmer of hope. Michael, a middle-aged man with thick glasses and a warm, steady voice, reviewed the documents related to the sale of her house. "There are several irregularities in this transaction," he said, flipping through the contract pages. "Mrs. Martha, after the house was sold, did you receive any of the proceeds?" She shook her head, her voice soft. "No, I didn't. I left everything to my son and daughter-in-law. They said they'd take care of me, and I trusted them." I held her hand, guilt surging within me. Michael took careful notes, then looked at me. "We have enough grounds to request an investigation. There are signs of coercion and fraud in the sale of the house. We'll send a demand letter to your family for restitution, and if necessary, we'll file a civil lawsuit. But Lennox, you need to prepare yourself. This will put significant pressure on your family." I nodded, though I couldn't help but feel anxious. I knew my parents, especially my father, wouldn't back down easily. But seeing Grandma sitting there, her trembling hands cradling her tea, I knew I couldn't stop. "Do it, Michael," I said. "I want my grandmother to get back what's hers." In the days that followed, my post continued to spread, not just in Manchester but across New Hampshire. Local community groups began sharing the story, and the hashtag Justice for Martha emerged, used by thousands. Local newspapers reached out for interviews, but I declined. I didn't want to turn Grandma's story into a media circus. I just wanted justice. But the storm didn't stop. One morning, I got a message from an old friend in Claremont. "Lennox, the whole town's buzzing about your parents. They're being called unfilial right in the middle of the coffee shop." I felt a small sense of satisfaction, but it was mixed with sadness. I didn't want to destroy my parents, but they needed to understand that what they did was wrong. The storm on social media didn't stop at words. The Elder Justice Alliance publicly supported Grandma's story, posting calls for the community to condemn elder abuse. The pressure kept mounting, and I knew sooner or later my parents would have to face the consequences. But I didn't expect those consequences to come so quickly, or that they would shake our entire family to its core. A few days after my post went viral, I received a call from Michael, the lawyer from the Elder Justice Alliance. His voice was serious but tinged with excitement. "Lennox, we've sent a demand letter for restitution regarding the sale of Mrs. Martha's house to your parents," he said. "If they don't agree to return the money, we'll file a civil lawsuit, and with the current public sentiment, they don't have much chance of winning." I sank into my chair, gripping the phone tightly, feeling a surge of strength but also fear. I didn't want to push my parents to the brink, but I couldn't forgive what they had done to Grandma. "Thank you, Michael," I said, my voice hoarse. "Do everything you can. I want my grandmother to get back what's hers." Michael chuckled softly over the phone. "Don't worry. The community is on your and Mrs. Martha's side. Your parents won't get out of this easily." Sure enough, the pressure from public opinion began to weigh heavily on my parents. Local newspapers in Claremont jumped on the story, publishing articles with sensational headlines. "Police officer accused of forcing elderly mother to sell home, sent to rundown nursing home." The articles quoted my story, along with calls from the Elder Justice Alliance and outraged comments from the community. They interviewed Grandma's old neighbors in Handover, who spoke of her dedication to her garden and the love she showed everyone around her. "Martha is a wonderful woman," Susan, her neighbor, said in one article. "I can't believe her son would treat her like that." In Claremont, my parents became the center of criticism. My father, once a respected local police officer, was now met with suspicious glances from colleagues. A friend from town told me that he had been called into an internal meeting at the police station, where his superiors demanded an explanation for the situation. "They're investigating your dad," my friend texted. "He's been temporarily suspended until things are cleared up." I read the message with a heavy heart. I didn't want my father to lose his job, but I couldn't deny that he deserved consequences. My mother didn't escape the storm either. As a literature teacher who prided herself on her image as a model mother in the eyes of parents and students, she faced backlash after the articles. A group of parents sent a letter to the school board demanding she no longer teach their children's classes, citing that a teacher lacking morals cannot educate students. I heard she cried in the teacher's lounge, but she didn't call me, didn't apologize, didn't explain. Instead, she sent a brief text. "Lennox, you've destroyed this family. Are you satisfied now?" Her message hit me like a punch to the chest. I didn't want to destroy our family, but I couldn't let Grandma suffer any longer. I called Brenda and told her about the text. She sighed over the phone. "Lennox, they're trying to make you feel guilty. Don't let them manipulate you. You're doing the right thing, and I'm proud of you." 2 weeks later, Michael called again. "They've agreed," he said, his voice elated. "Your parents will return the full amount from the sale of Mrs. Martha's house. They don't want to go to court, especially with public opinion against them. The money will be transferred to her account in a few days." I could hardly believe my ears. "Really? They didn't fight it?" Michael laughed. "Fight? They wouldn't dare. The Claremont community is turning its back on them. They know things will only get worse if they keep resisting." When I told Grandma, she sat silently, her frail hands clasped tightly together. "Lennox, I don't need the money," she said, her eyes welling up. "I just want to live in peace. But thank you for standing up for me." I hugged her, feeling the warmth of the woman who taught me about love and knew that no matter how painful this had been, I had done the right thing. The consequences didn't end with the money. My parents were shunned by the local community. Neighbors who once invited them to weekend barbecues now avoided them at the grocery store. My father was suspended from work indefinitely, and my mother had to take a leave of absence due to pressure from parents. Part of me felt a sense of vindication, but a larger part ached. They were still my parents after all, but they had chosen their path and I had chosen mine, the path of protecting Grandma, of seeking justice. With the money returned, Grandma, with my guidance, decided to buy a small house in the suburbs of Manchester, just a few miles from my apartment. It was a charming wooden house, not as large as the one in Hanover, but with a small yard big enough for her to plant her beloved carnations again. On the day she moved in, my friends from the apartment building helped arrange her belongings. Jake, one of my friends, brought his guitar to christen the house with a lively tune. Grandma stood in the yard looking at the newly planted flower pots and smiled. "Lennox, I feel like I'm alive again," she said, her voice soft but brimming with happiness. I decided to move in with her. My freelance writing work was starting to stabilize, and I secured a few long-term contracts with local publications. Every morning I brewed tea for her, listening as she told stories of her youth, of my grandfather, of the dreams she once had. I realized that, in the journey to protect her, I had found my life's purpose. I was no longer the lost 23-year-old scrambling for jobs in Manchester. I had become the person Grandma always believed in, the one who stood up for what was right. That Christmas, Brenda brought her young daughter, Julie, to visit us. The small house was filled with laughter as Julie ran around the yard picking carnations to make flower crowns. Brenda hugged me tightly, whispering, "You've made me proud, Lennox. You've given Grandma a home and given both of us a real family." We sat around the dining table enjoying a simple but warm Christmas dinner with Grandma at the center, her smile radiant like the lights on the Christmas tree. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, Grandma called me out to the yard. She pointed to a cluster of newly bloomed carnations, their soft pink petals glowing under the moonlight. "Lennox, do you see? Flowers bloom most beautifully when cared for with love." She took my hand, her eyes shining. "You've cared for me with love, and that's the most precious gift." I smiled, feeling lighter than ever. The storm had passed, and though my family had shattered, I knew I had found a true home. Not just for Grandma, but for myself. In the months that followed, our lives settled into a rhythm. The small house in Manchester's suburbs became my refuge, filled with the scent of vanilla cookies wafting from the kitchen, Grandma's soft humming of old songs, and peaceful afternoons spent tending the garden together. Each blooming carnation was a testament to her love and resilience, and I learned from her that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the simplest moments. I began writing our entire story, from the days Grandma was pressured to sell her beloved house in Hanover, to the lonely weeks in Claremont, to the harrowing birthday at the nursing home. I wrote about my anger, my father's slap, the way social media rallied for her, and the ultimate victory when she reclaimed the money and a new home. I didn't write for revenge, but to share a lesson, that love and conscience can overcome even the deepest wounds. I submitted the piece to a national magazine focused on elder rights, not expecting much, only hoping Grandma's story would touch someone the way it had transformed me. A month later, I received an email from the magazine's editor. "Lennox, your story is deeply moving," they wrote. "We want to publish it in our special issue on elder abuse. Would you agree?" My hands trembled as I read the email, tears streaming down my cheeks. I ran out to the garden where Grandma was watering the flowers and told her. She smiled, stroking my hair as she did when I was a child. "You've found your path, Lennox," she said, her eyes glowing with pride. "I always knew you'd do something great." The article was published, and the response exceeded my wildest expectations. Hundreds of people wrote to the magazine, sharing their own stories of elderly loved ones neglected or abused. Some thanked me for giving them the courage to speak out, just as I had for Grandma. A nonprofit media organization reached out, offering me a job as an editor specializing in social issues and human rights. "You have a gift for telling stories that make people think," they said during the interview. "We need people like you." I accepted not just for the job, but because I knew it was a way to carry on Grandma's legacy, a legacy of love and conscience. One spring evening, as Grandma and I sat in the yard watching the sunset, she took my hand. "Lennox, you know," she said, her voice warm and steady, "life isn't always fair, but if you live with your heart and do what's right, you'll always find the light." I nodded, feeling the warmth of her hand, and knew she wasn't just talking about our story, but about what I'd carry with me for the rest of my life. Our story didn't end with the carnations or the little house in Manchester. It lived on through the articles I sent out into the world, through the people inspired to speak up, through the small but meaningful changes in the lives of those I'd never met. I learned that justice doesn't come easily. It demands courage, perseverance, and sometimes painful sacrifices. But when you stand up for what's right, you don't just change one person's life, you change the world around you. As I write these final lines, I look out at the garden where Grandma is watering the flowers under the sunset's glow. She looks up, smiles at me, and I know the fire she sparked in me will never fade. "Thank you, Grandma," I whisper, too soft for her to hear. "Thank you for giving me the strength to change."